Something I pick up pretty frequently from conversations I have with artists is that a lot of difficulties and frustrations people have with their art stem from some misaligned goals and incentives. It seems to be the case that many times the perceived importance of certain aspects of what it takes to create art and be good at creating it are blown completely out of proportion. As artists, we often conjure up and carry around with us a bunch of unclear or misplaced goals that haven't been properly evaluated, which makes way for our tendency to develop fixations on practices that we believe would lead us to these unclear goals, such as rote exercises for the sake of improvement and, in a broader sense, fixation on the raw concept of improvement in abstract. I see these things as distractions from the more important aspects of a healthy art practice. These fixations are misleading paths that only lead to dead ends in the practice, and many artists who wind up on them never really find their way out. Many of our ideas about what we believe it takes to improve, our expectations surrounding our growth, and our prioritization of improvement-centered goals are often at odds with the nature of improvement itself. It seems intuitive to conclude that practicing a skill and, in turn, getting better at the skill is a one-to-one transaction, and that all you need to do to noticeably increase your skill is to practice more. It really isn't that clear-cut, but we tend to operate under the assumption that it is, which leads to the hyperfixation on getting good, which leads to letting the outcome of our art determine how happy or disappointed we feel when our projected model of improvement doesn't map to reality, which once again leads us to mistakenly being too hard on ourselves or concluding that the solution is to focus on our improvement even more. This clearly isn't the result of a sustainable art practice. Lots of artists have goals that hinge on their improvement, but improvement is, in all honesty, too elusive and ungraspable of a thing to base just about any of your values on. You can't objectively measure it, you can't easily predict it or view it on a timeline, and it's a vague, mushy concept that we tangle our self-worth up in unnecessarily. Some of us even delay joy and satisfaction from our art because we trick ourselves into believing that our skill level is the gate between us and enjoying our craft, and that improvement is the key that unlocks for us permission to enjoy what we do today rather than in the future. Letting the desire for growth and improvement alone fuel your drive to go about a training arc to achieve these is likely going to end up being a vain endeavor for most people. There's a distinction between repeatedly studying concepts in art for the purpose of learning and understanding them, and repeatedly studying for the sake of simply wanting to improve your skills with these concepts, and the latter is the slippery slope we want to avoid. Improvement is a nice thing to aspire to at first. It gives you sort of a spark or a burst of motivation sometimes, but it's a flimsy goal to have in and of itself. And if improvement is your only aspiration in art, if you haven't already, you will certainly burn out trying to chase this ghost of an end goal. Improvement is intangible and not within your abilities to accelerate the process of, but only noticeable over time when you aren't actively trying to make it happen. It's like trying to brute force the growth of a plant. Impossible. There is a natural order to certain things that we must honor and accept that we cannot play any direct part in the course of. Improvement happens when you're not actually doing any drawing. It happens when you're getting a good night's rest, or when you go about your day and think about the things you learned, while letting these topics slowly grow their roots in your mind and take up residence in your subconscious. And like a plant, as the weeks, months, and years go by, you'll notice the growth that happened in between the time you spent trying to expedite said growth. Things will run their course. Yet, despite this, there is still a desire amongst artists to seek solutions to these things that aren't under their control in the way they might assume them to be. People tend to want clear-cut answers about making art. They want to know, how many years should I study X subject? How many hours a day should I draw to improve? When should I expect to start seeing improvement? Is doing A more efficient than doing B, and etc.? Unless you're working under a specific curriculum where the answers to these questions matter, forget these things. There are no rules or best practices when it comes to developing as an artist. Everyone's mind works differently, and it's a personal and creative journey to discover what works for you for each of these questions. I'm not inclined to give clear answers on these sorts of questions because I don't think they're the right questions, but People will provide answers to them, and just blindly following a timeline or solution that worked for that person without a disclaimer that this whole thing is an individual pursuit can really throw off the trajectory of someone just wanting to learn. It's important to realize that there's no perfectly optimized, highly efficient, one size fits all method to increase your skill at art, because if there were, everyone would be doing it. You passively improve at the things you spend time doing. In fact, I believe you passively improve at art even when you're not doing it for months. And let's not conflate the passive process of improvement with the active process of studying and working on your skills. Unlike these active processes, improving at art isn't something you do. It's something that happens to you. I think there's a useful analogy between getting better at art and growing a plant that maybe giving some thought to may help explain the nature of improvement. When a plant grows, you're not growing the plant exactly. You're more so creating the right environment that is conducive to the plant's growth. There are things you can do to cultivate this environment, such as planting the seed in quality soil and giving the plant nutrients. But its growth is out of your hands at a certain point. If we're speaking strictly in terms of what's literally happening, the plant does the act of growing all on its own. And you just need to trust that if you've set the right conditions, it's just going to do its thing. And we can extrapolate this idea beyond just the plant itself and think of the plant's growth overall as a gradual, ongoing process that you cannot expedite. Improvement is a consequence of living. It's like a sapling that grows into a healthy, fruitful tree. Wouldn't it sound just a little silly to draw conclusions about your self-worth based on how well or efficiently you can grow a tree, something you have very limited control over? I feel as though a large contributor towards many artists developing unhealthy obsessions with their level of ability stem from critical judgments of the quality of the artwork and expecting that you should be able to make good art. Being so hung up on how good or bad you think you are causes you to miss the whole point of what creating art is all about. Thinking this way does a lot of damage to your relationship with art, and it's a shame that things end up going this way for so many artists. This mindset leads to a lot of crazy conclusions, like artists assuming that they must be good at art in order to enjoy doing it, or artists stopping themselves from continuing to create art because they don't like the outcome of their work. And some even go as far as to deny themselves the label of artist, as if that's something you could earn the title of after reaching a certain level of skill. It can grow to be painfully difficult to continue to create art if your joy is derived solely from getting better, or if it's derived from the quality of your work and how it looks to you. There's only so long you can operate this way before you find yourself not wanting to make art anymore. This is why knowing that improvement is inevitable frees you from delaying joy in the practice. It relinquishes you from any imagined responsibility you have to obtain some arbitrary level of skill. You can make a choice as to where in the art practice you want to get your joy from, and at some point along the way, unbeknownst to you, you probably adopted or developed the belief that joy should come from the outcome or your skill level. And if things go well, you're happy, and if they don't, you feel bad and you think you suck at art. You have to insist on other ways to gain joy from making art that aren't reliant on things you don't have control over. And I do mean insist. Your joy for making art is something to be serious about maintaining, and noticing that it's lacking or contingent upon the wrong things is definitely worthy of investigation. But despite this, you might still think, well, yeah, I get that you improve over time and that I shouldn't let the results determine how I feel, but I'm not liking the results now, and it's hard to enjoy making art if I'm not seeing any progress after all of my efforts. Well, truth be told, art is difficult, and I think part of the reason you would want to get better at it is because you know it's something difficult. You know it's a challenge, and simply challenging yourself can be a source of great energy and potential growth. Not liking the results is a pretty natural response at first, but the thing it's probably best to avoid is becoming obsessive over the amount of progress we think we have or haven't made. The outcomes of your efforts can vary wildly regardless of how effortful or effortless you try to work. no matter how far along you are with your perceived progress. You can make your greatest work when you're not even paying attention, when you're not doing any one part masterfully or intentionally. How does that sit with you? The fact that for all your diligent studies, persistence on improvement, active deliberation on what you think it takes to make something good, despite all of that, you can sit down and start drawing with low hopes and poor expectations and still manage to get lost in it anyway and surprise yourself by how thoughts about your abilities are usually obstacles to achieving flow. And of course, every possible outcome is available from every possible mental state. Art you love done while hating it. Art you end up hating done while feeling like you're at your best. Art is just weird and unpredictable like that. Of course, it's not a prerequisite that you be completely careless and absent from the entire process for good work to come out. It's not exactly the conclusion that I'm trying to draw. This is just a testament to the fact that art is mysterious, which is why we can't let thoughts about trying to control what we fundamentally can't lead us astray. So instead of constantly thinking about these things, just spend more time doing, more time making, and more time really paying attention to what can be learned from being in the act of creating, rather than contemplating or hypothesizing about methods that may optimize your potential gains or efficiency when creating. Are there things that you can do that contribute to improvement in the long run? Yes, of course. But let's just leave it at that. Don't make it a huge focus to do things in art with the end goal of just getting better with no other criteria in place for you to meet. Because really, who will be the one that determines that you've sufficiently improved? And when that time comes, what kind of award is given to mark the occasion? Will you know that you've finally done it and gathered all the skill you wish you had? Or is it more likely to be the case that, I don't know, that maybe that time will never come and your tastes and standards will always be developing alongside your skills, but your desired goalposts for improvement and your imaginary ideals for what would qualify you to be a good enough artist will always be just out of reach of your abilities. And if you keep up with this mindset, you'll just continue to endlessly chase a metaphorical carrot on a stick at the perpetual cycle that is skill-based improvement focused learning. We must be careful not to trick ourselves into thinking that improvement is the end-all be-all. Set goals that are actually tangible in art, such as making work that you feel captures an idea or fulfills an objective, or just make art with the goal of finding satisfaction in the act of doing it. This is what will help you navigate the times when it feels as though your improvement in art fluctuates or even regresses. And it certainly does feel that way. But these feelings aren't based on any truth about what's actually happening with our improvement. We say that we're not improving or that we've gotten worse at something based on our perception of our abilities on any given day through the lens of improvement being something we have full control over. Improvement doesn't really have ups and downs. When you make good art one day and bad art the next, that's not due to your level of improvement. That's your feelings about your skill that are being misattributed to the idea of improvement. And even if you think you're viewing your improvement objectively and not through the lens of feelings or emotions, I'd say that even that's barely measurable. It's a fuzzy thing with no hard points. We're not even the perfect judge of our own improvement anyways, especially over short time spans like weeks or months. At periods that feel like low points in the art practice, there are probably a lot of reasons why we may think we're not improving. And many of them might be due to us getting in our own way or in our head about stuff that we cannot control, among other things. But I'm reluctant to say that it's a fact that you're not improving in these situations. I don't believe it's actually possible to stop improving in the long run, because drawing is an activity largely driven by the subconscious, and as a result of this, just about every aspect of our lives and connections between things we experience contribute to our development cognitively and to our understanding of the world, which I believe inevitably contribute to your improvement in art. You don't have to notice it happening. Just know that background process is already running and let go of trying to control it. Focus your efforts on other aspects of art, like learning the art fundamentals. No, not perspective or anatomy, no. The real art fundamentals. You know, the fundamentals of self-discovery, having fun and being excited about making art, the fundamental of avoiding things that suck the joy out of it for you, even if it's something everyone says is important to do to improve. Those are the real important things, in my opinion. Now that you're not thinking about improvement anymore, use this free mental space you have to be creative about how you can enjoy what you do. Think about what got you into art in the first place and how you can keep this practice sustainable. Have healthy motivations be the reason you return to your art. Or just don't think about anything. Just draw. Thanks for listening.